Thanks for joining us for an update on Hurricane Lee. I'm SaltWire weather specialist Allister Aalders, keeping a very close eye on the hurricane and how it's going to influence the weather here in Atlantic Canada as we go through the upcoming weekend. Here was a look at Lee on satellite imagery this afternoon. There is Bermuda, and as we take a look at the latest track from the National Hurricane Center, you can see that Lee will be moving northward over the next couple of days, passing to the west of Bermuda, and then on Saturday morning, a Category 1 hurricane weakening as it approaches the Gulf of Maine, and the latest track has it making landfall near the border between New Brunswick and Maine, likely late Saturday evening or early on Sunday morning. And then the post-tropical remnants will move towards Newfoundland and Labrador as we head towards the early stages of next week. As we take a look at the steering for Lee, we have this large ridge of high pressure, and we initially thought this trough would have more of an influence, but you can see that trough lifts off towards the north, so not really steering Lee. Here is Lee there. We have this ridge firmly in place and then a new trough trying to steer it westward, which is why we have observed some of those shifts in the track. However, important to note that guidance still ranges from about the south shore of Nova Scotia to southeastern Maine, so we need to keep a very close eye on the track over the next couple of days. But as we take a look at the latest weather timeline to kind of map out when we could see the impacts from Lee, you can see that as we go later Friday evening, overnight into Saturday morning, we'll have periods of rain developing across Nova Scotia, PEI, and the southern half of New Brunswick. Winds will also be ramping up during this time, looking at a relatively calm day for Newfoundland and Labrador. But as you can see, Lee will be moving over the region, so showers will linger with us through the upcoming weekend, continuing on Sunday, and these gusty winds will also continue as we go through the upcoming weekend. We could be looking at gusts of 60 to 80 or 90 kilometers per hour for much of the region. However, it looks like the Fundy Coast in the South Shore, we could see tropical force winds of 63 or higher, gusting up to 100, maybe even a bit higher, possibly 110. For Newfoundland and Labrador, this does develop as we go Saturday night through Sunday, and this will remain a weather story for you as we head into the early stages of next week. Once it clears out of the Maritimes, it will be lingering for you on Monday. Now, waves and storm surge, of course, a concern, and you can see that we have some very large waves coming up ahead of Lee on Friday. But Saturday is where I'm really keeping a close eye on right now. You can see along the Atlantic coast of Nova Scotia and possibly the Fundy Coast. This is where we'll be looking at the highest waves, and I'm talking possibly 6 to 12 meters, and we need to keep a very close eye on high tide times because storm surge could be possible, especially along the Atlantic coast of Nova Scotia and as well along the Fundy coast of New Brunswick. So I'll be watching that. You can see that waves start to diminish as we go through Sunday and into Monday. So the latest with Lee, to kind of wrap it up, because we don't have necessarily all the specifics yet because of some uncertainties with the track. Those details will become known tomorrow and Friday. But looks like we'll have an extended period of gusty winds, especially over the western half of Nova Scotia and southwestern New Brunswick, where we'll see tropical storm force winds gusting up to 60, 70, 80, possibly 90 kilometers per hour or higher. Winds will be strong across the entire region, so keep that in mind because Lee is going to be growing in size as it becomes post-tropical. So even though it might not land in Nova Scotia, this will be a growing storm, so it's going to have widespread impacts. Now, the westward track means that the most significant rainfall could remain outside of Atlantic Canada. Currently looking at New Brunswick for the heaviest rain. If that does shift eastward, we'll have to keep an eye on Nova Scotia for the rainfall. And as I just mentioned, the waves. The greatest threat for large waves and storm surge will be along Nova Scotia's Atlantic coast and the Fundy coast of both Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. We have full coverage on Hurricane Lee. Head over to saltwire.com for the latest as this storm approaches.